And to moderate the session, it's good to have back a journalist with global experience who's a special correspondent for the popular PBS NewsHour in the USA. Please, a warm welcome to Mr. Ryan Chilcote.
Thank you very much, Riz. Thank you. Well, hello, Almaty. How's everyone doing? I know there have been some mind-bending conversations today. The good news is that this is the last, and more importantly, best session of the day. So those of you who have chosen to stick around are going to be rewarded. I think this is also a conversation that none of us can really afford to miss. You don't need me to tell you our world is changing in profound ways. Donald Trump, President Xi, and closer to home, Vladimir Putin, are not the only ones driving that change. Technology, that big inanimate object, and its architects are a big factor. As Riz was saying, my name is Ryan Chilcote. I'm a special correspondent at the American news program PBS NewsHour, and I'm ecstatic about being here in Almaty. Spasiba огромное за теплый пока прием. I'm also delighted that the Eurasian Media Forum has both invited me and has brought together a really fantastic global group of thinkers for our discussion now. Allow me to introduce them, beginning with Martin Ford, futurist and author of this book, Rise of the Robots, Technology and the Threat of Mass Unemployment. And Martin, please join us. And another book called Martin has another book that's just come out, which you must read, called The Architects of Intelligence. Obviously, we're going to be exploring that today. Next panelist I'd like to call is Muthoni Wanyoike from Kenya. She is from Instadeep, a company that builds AI solutions. She does a lot of other extraordinary things, which we'll get into a little bit later in our conversation. Thank you very much for joining us. In the preparation, I was so delighted to speak with her. Next up, I'd like to call Anton Mussin, Managing Director at Accenture, Kazakhstan. Thank you for coming, Anton. Anton is obviously based here in Kazakhstan, but he's done stints in Abu Dhabi and Moscow. He heads up the technological or the technology team and is also a specialist in the field of financial services. So we look forward to hearing your views. Next up, Radu Magdin, international consultant who is passionate about technology, was just sharing that passion with me, and who has also advised the governments of Romania, Moldova, as well as the European Union on how they pursue technology, how they regulate it, and how to apply artificial technology for the betterment of their citizens. And last but not least, Kazakhstan's own Vice Minister for Digital Development, Defense, and Aerospace, a mouthful, Ablayhan Aspanov. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Thinking a little bit about the title of our conversation, which is AI, it asks the question, is AI a renaissance for humanity? That's a good question. You know, when people think of the Renaissance, it was a real boom time between the 14th and 17th centuries for arts and literature in Europe. Is AI going to be the same for the entire planet? Martin, if I could, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I definitely think that artificial intelligence is got the potential to be completely transformative and to really accelerate progress for us, whether you want to call that a renaissance or simply a rapid advance in the state of affairs. It will be a tool that will allow us to make remarkable breakthroughs in science, in medicine. It will help us to address some of the biggest challenges that we face, things like climate change, things like global poverty, clean energy, and so forth. So I think that it has enormous potential to be transformative in that way. But at the same time, there is another side to artificial intelligence. It has the potential, for example, to greatly increase inequality, to create a society where the rich get richer and nearly everyone else is at risk of being left behind. And there are many other concerns, things like the impact on privacy, the potential for bias against certain groups of people, the potential for it to be weaponized, and so forth. And these are all very, very important considerations. And so I think that our challenge, really for all of us and for governments, and part of the reason that we need to have forums and conversations like this, the challenge is to find ways to address the downsides, the risks of AI, and therefore leverage all of these potential benefits on everyone at every level of our societies.
Thank you very much. Anton, let me ask, I don't know if I've got my microphone working here. I may be coming in and out. Let me ask you, renaissance of AI, is there a little hype in that?
Yes, I believe that being the part of the corporate sector, yes, and serving the corporate sector for already many, many years, I see and I hear different opinions and about the AI. And of course, everybody in the corporate environment, everybody accepts the fact that AI technology is the future. Everybody accepts that they can gain some values and they can improve their businesses, they can get new revenues. But there is always the question, how much and when? How much and when? And it's, at least right now, quite debatable question, at least in the corporate environment, among different companies, big companies and small companies, if we should expect the new, how we call it, winter in AI. Because we've seen it already in 60s, we've seen it in the beginning of 80s. There were already 2 AI winters. And at the same time, there are some signs on the market that we can expect some changes in expectations, some changes in what people and companies, they are not getting what they do probably expect out of this technology.
Muthoni, you're in a company that's working to provide AI solutions for businesses. Do you agree?
Okay. Thank you. I agree that AI has the massive potential to transform the world and the way we see problems and the way we solve problems. And for me as an African, I think AI also gives me the elusive opportunity to solve challenges that we have had over and over again. Issues like poverty, access to quality healthcare, access to quality education. Looking at AI and using things like mobile technology are really enabling us to leapfrog and be to achieve solutions that we wouldn't have had without access to technology.
Well, let's explore that. Radu, let me come to you. I mean, this idea in the title of this being a renaissance for humanity was really European event in many ways. Is that how it's or are people who are, for example, in advanced economies, sitting in Silicon Valley, are they better positioned than, say, in Kenya or in Romania or in...
I would say, first of all, the words matter a lot, and narratives matter a lot. I think, first of all, that the future is already here. Just because there are technology gaps in between us, and some of us are where you may call the past still, technology like in the 90s. Some of us are doing technology like in the 2000s. And some of us, because we don't see what's happening in a series of high-tech labs, maybe already in 2025 or 2030. So that's why I'm saying that the future is already here. I think that each time I go on a panel, I think what would be the added value in the conversation. I think the added value on my side is that having worked with high-level politicians, prime ministers, you develop a certain sense of a constructive paranoid mind. By this I mean that the future will not be good by itself. The future, like the present, you need a plan for it. planning is indispensable, although sometimes things don't go to plan. There are two things which have been mentioned in previous panels, and I fully agree with them. One is the fact that the next populist wave will be related to technology. So we have to, for the moment, populists across the world, they're busy with topics like migration. We'll see this quite strong right now at European elections. But if we don't prepare this, and I mean us, civil society, companies, political stakeholders, then we may not be getting this evolution or revolution right. And one more comment. Speaking of language matters, this panel is about the age of AI. Interestingly, we've been to copper, we've been to other ages. We'll see if the age of AI will also be the golden age for humanity. It's going to be really important for us to get it right.
Martin, do you see that danger of populism focusing, mobilizing people against technology? I mean, if you look at the United States, there are a lot of people, obviously, that say that the popularity of President Trump is the fact that he is anti-establishment, that he is the sort of big issue has been immigration. But I mean, presumably, technology is responsible for some of the lack in wage growth and some of the issues when it comes to coming into the current period, that some of the joblessness and low-paying jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you talk to most economists, they will tell you that technology has had a greater impact than other things like globalization and certainly immigration in the United States, and is therefore, a larger cause of the complaints of many average people in the United States, the fact that they're kind of being left behind. And so those people are angry, they're not seeing the kind of progress that they really expected, and many of them did go ahead and vote for Mr. Trump. And they would point perhaps to globalization, to China, to immigration, to people coming from Mexico and so forth. And of course, it's a lot easier to point at another human being, whether it's an immigrant or a worker in another country, than it is to focus on this intangible force of advancing technology. And yet technology is probably a much more important factor. And as artificial intelligence in particular becomes more powerful, this is going to become more dramatic. And I do think there's a real risk that it could lead to social upheaval, to economic upheaval, and to political upheaval, to the rise of demagogues and so forth. So this is one of the main reasons I think we really need to talk about this and come up with some real solutions for addressing this.
Ablachain, if I might, I wanted to, one of the things that we've discussed so far is that governments need to prepare for this age of AI. I ask you the question, is someone sitting in Kazakhstan as well positioned to take advantage of the age of AI as somebody sitting in Silicon Valley?
Спасибо за вопрос. Я думаю, да, она будет являться равноценной, потому что вы знаете, что в современном веке технологий сегодня нет границ. То есть нет границ, независимо, где ты работаешь, где ты живешь, получаешь услуги в Индии, либо в Силиконовой долине, либо ты родом из Африки. Да, если у тебя сегодня есть талант, и если ты нуждаешься в тех или иных технологиях, сегодня ты можешь это получить в любой точке мира. То есть я думаю, что сегодня, как, наверное, я подключусь к дискуссии касательно AI, я думаю, его бояться уже не стоит, потому что он уже среди нас. То есть мы его даже можем не ощущать, да, то есть, но в сфере оказания в целом услуг, это пусть будет это и контакт-центры, это пусть будут и какие-то врачебные консультации, то сегодня уже этого не замечают, то основные предпосылки AI, то есть они уже есть. То есть мы даже можем не заметить, отвечает ли нам на услуги, когда мы звоним в контакт-центр, отвечает ли это нам человек, либо отвечает это искусственный интеллект. То есть во многих городах сегодня, в странах, которые сегодня развиты в сфере IT, мы знаем, что уже машинопотоком, транспортом, управлением городом, да, то есть уже занимается искусственный интеллект. Я думаю, что сегодня хорошая очень тематика говорит о закате либо о рассвете человечества. Я думаю, этого не избежать. То есть мы в любом случае к этому придем. У нас сегодня есть IoT, у нас сегодня есть Big Data, у нас есть большие данные, и я думаю, следующим шагом это уже непосредственно посыл к тому, что искусственный интеллект, он уже на пороге, его просто не надо бояться.
Thank you very much. Muthoni, Nairobi, are people there at a disadvantage when it comes to this new age?
I think yes and no. Yes, because access to compute, access to education, access to data is very restricted in this context. But I also think that the AI community, especially in the research community, the openness in conducting research gives a very interesting perspective to the sharing of information, such that papers being published from Silicon Valley or Nairobi or Tanzania or China are accessible to anyone, and this is AI research that is possible, that is accessible to anyone and everyone. So in as much as we do not have access to as much compute or as much data, I feel like we have access to information, and that is an important step in empowering underdeveloped countries. So if you think about past technologies and past advancements, industrial advancements, we had research happening in the US and in the UK and in other countries, but in continents like Africa it was all quiet or no one knew about what was happening. But this collaborative project, or just sharing of information, I think is making this more inclusive. We could do better, but yeah, I think there's hope.
Sorry, go ahead, Martin, and then I'll bring you guys in.
Yeah, I just commented, I'm quite optimistic about this technology really having a global impact. I think it's important to separate where the research is being done from you know, the application of these technologies. And it certainly is true that most of the research and development in AI is especially concentrated in the US and in China right now, but it's also happening in many other countries. Google just opened a research center in Africa, for example, so we are bringing more people into that. But the key is that regardless of where the technology is actually developed, it's going to diffuse very rapidly. It's going to, you know, really impact in countries all over the world. I mean, one of the main arguments I always make is that artificial intelligence is going to be a utility, a general purpose technology, not so different from electricity. So just in the way that electricity is everywhere and is used everywhere, you're going to see artificial intelligence used everywhere in countries throughout the world. So everyone is going to have ultimately an opportunity to benefit from the advances that come along with these technologies, and are also going to be subject to some of the risks that come from these technologies. So it is truly a global phenomenon, I think.
Look, we're in the early stages of something that looks like a trade skirmish between the United States and China. Martin just mentioned those are the two big players right now in the development of AI. I noticed on Monday of this week, the U.S. blacklisted Huawei for many purposes in the United States. Google on the back of that said that they'll probably won't be able to provide Android to Huawei phones. So what does this mean for the future of AI if we're getting this sort of division amongst national lines when it comes to, you know, technological development?
It's going to be increasing, I would say, increasing competition. We're not only talking about great power competition, we're also talking about technological competition. From this perspective, I would say as an European that we're more relaxed, but relaxed in a way that we need to catch up. One of the basic debates right now in Brussels, particularly after the club gets its house in order after European elections, will be, are we a technological laggard or not? You know, looking at the top 15 companies right now, in terms of technology, you know, you can only see American or Chinese players. So from this perspective, yes, increased competition, which means also more money for research and development. I think this is very good. You will also see a lot of, in this great power competition, a lot of product or company demonization. I think we're already seeing this as regards Huawei. But I'm not sure that on a global, I would say, charm offensive or a global fight for winning hearts and minds, if anyone has a strategy. I think there are several hearts and minds and several nuances, and I think you have to personalize the message. For example, right now, I think that if I would be the US, I would try to, or if I would be China, I would try to craft different messages for different audiences, because it's not really the same kind of message that you may be sending to me as a European via my media, or the same message that you want to send to Africa. All of us want to be rising. Nobody wants to be on the decline. Technology is also about dominance, but also about a sense of pride. I remember, I'll give you just one example on how a technological debate can totally change in just a decade. I was in the European Parliament working there 10 years ago, and the basic quest was we were on an elevator and suddenly somebody just took out an iPhone. It was really cool. So technology goes in terms of debate from the, wow, the cool element, Then 10 years later, you have a whole debate about regulation, privacy, what do you get via different applications, who stores that data, who transfers that data, and so on. I think we'll be heading for a whole debate about technology, ethical, values, society, and then eventually some kind of regulation.
Very good.
Yes, it's quite interesting point here is the competition that we see right now on the government level, on the corporate level, and taking in mind the limitations of, at least current technological limitations of AI engines and AI technology. And one of the biggest limitations actually for most of the AI technology, you need data. You need data and a lot of data. And the key limitation of current AI technology that on the small amount of data, you cannot teach AI. And I believe that those countries who will be able to manage the access to the big amount of data and feed them into the AI engines, they will benefit out of this. And they will most probably lead this race in the future. And there are a lot of questions around the access of the data, around who holds the data, why me as a person should share this data. And I believe, again, those companies and countries who will be able to manage this faster will be able to succeed.
Yeah, I think that competition is inevitable. I think that what Anton says is correct, that having lots of data is an advantage, and that's one of the reasons that China is looking to be a dramatic force in this. They've got over 1 billion people, they've got very advanced mobile payments technology, all of which generates huge amounts of data that they can then use to train their algorithms. So they're going to be a major force. I think there's such a thing as healthy competition, right? That it's a good thing that when you have businesses like Google and Facebook and Tencent and Baidu all competing, that generates progress. When you have research scientists competing for the next breakthrough, that's a good thing. That means more progress. And right now it's fairly open. Scientists working in different countries are all publishing papers, so they see each other's breakthroughs, and that pushes things forward. But there is a danger of a more dystopian, dangerous kind of arms race, because artificial intelligence, of course, is not just a commercial technology. It's something that will have applications in the military sphere, in national security applications. And so there is the real risk of, national competitions in those areas between the US and China and Russia and so forth. And that could lead to some more negative outcomes. So it is something that I think we need to watch carefully. And there are some areas where we need coordination, perhaps through the United Nations, to regulate things like autonomous weapons and so forth, so that we don't get into a kind of a dystopian arms race.
Vice Minister, one of the things that I was most intrigued about was that the same ministry here in Kazakhstan that is in charge of digitalization, of advancing the digital economy, is also in charge of national security and, for example, buying the weapons for the military. Is that a coincidence?
Это, наверное, не совпадение.
This perhaps not a coincidence. It's more of the course of development of technologies. But I'd like to say we're not looking after national security. We look after information security. Today, as we say, technologies are practically everywhere. In defense industry, in aerospace industry, and accordingly in development of digitalization, of course, at the final stages, there most definitely should be ensuring information security of the whole flow of data that today is being collected in terabytes every day. And today, perhaps, it's just the influence of the times that all of this has to be in one ministry that would coordinate this development of ICT.
If I could take us back now a little bit away from the geopolitical competitive aspects of this and look at how governments can help prepare future generations. I'd like to ask you, Muthoni, you were telling me about Kenyan children and your experience with, introducing them, talking to them about AI. What was that like?
I think because of the news cycles, there's a lot of curiosity about AI, both with really young kids and even with older people. And it's beginning to raise very interesting conversations. And the conversation I was having with you was just trying to explain to kids who are under 10 what artificial intelligence is.
10 years old.
Yes, 10 and under. And after we sort of agreed on a definition, the next question that came up was, then what do they do? Is what they are studying in school important, and how does that prepare them for the future? So I think as governments, we need to be more proactive in dealing with technology and not reactive. Like he mentioned, 10 years ago, we were excited about the iPhone, and now we are asking questions about it. With AI, I think governments have to think 100 years from now and try and visualize what can we do better, what kind of access do our people need. And for me, I think the issue with AI really is not about malice, but it's more about technical competence. And if we focus on building competence that is quantifiable, then that might be an important step. Yeah.
Radu, I saw you're nodding your head there.
Yes, I do agree. I think that I'm going to invite you for a moment to step back and think of the news you saw in the past week. And I think you're going to realize something, that there is no week, sometimes even no day, without some kind of technological news. Also, I would like for you to notice something. It's like a pendulum. It goes from one way to the other. News are only one way or the other. Either it's a tech hype, like let's say the best evangelist for this would be Mr. Musk, right? So either you're talking about the greatest technology and wow, technology is wonderful, or quite the contrary, at the different end of the pendulum, you have what you may call Project Fear. You have some kind of distressing news. Oh my God, driverless cars. Will that provoke an accident? I can't rely on that. What would happen if? The reason why I focus so much on stakeholder decisions and preparing the debate is the following. Speaking of that constructive paranoid mind, things will not happen by themselves. And we will not have the luxury with this fourth industrial revolution of the past three industrial revolutions. In the sense that when you first had, let's say, the engine, right? 19th century, which fundamentally changed things, and the trains and so on. There was no democratic debate. Nobody really asked workers, do you feel fine, when to switch to this model? Are you comfortable? Everything is okay. Decisions were simply implemented. Nowadays, we can't afford, in terms of global public opinion or national public opinion, to do fundamentally different things without a public debate. Or if we manage to do that, the risk is to derail that. Why did that happen? Why did you create a factory of robots? Why in that region? That region has unemployment. Even though unemployment may be 2% in one region, there will be a scandal in case somebody spins this, why are we doing a robotic factory and so on. So all of the things, I think, We need to prepare them. I think it's important, and I think that the governments who will start thinking about it will be Premier League. I'll give you a short example. The Emirates. The Emirates are already thinking about Area 2071. Okay, mostly from a technology point of view, but nonetheless, I think other questions will arise.
Anton.
Yes, that's quite interesting question. What government can do now to start preparing the society for the AI future? And of course, most of us, not most, some of us, are afraid that AI will come and we will lose the job. Yes, so this is quite common. I would say, situation. And my view is that things that government can start doing immediately coming from the limitations of the AI itself, and we know them. One I already announced. So this is the AI needs data. Yeah. Second is AI cannot convert knowledge from one area to another. If you teach AI engine for one specific area, for example, you can teach AI to play chess. You cannot take this engine and start, I don't know, driving the car. These are two completely different AIs. And probably the final one is AI cannot teach AI. And teaching of AI is very important topic. And this is one of the most important limitations right now. And for all of these limitations, you need people. You need people, you need knowledge. And I believe that government right now can start fulfilling these limitations with the people capabilities. And preparing people to teach AI engines, to prepare data, to create new AI agents. Because as it's rightly been mentioned, AI will be the commodity, but then you need a brain to start, human brain, to start creating out of this some value.
Your most recent book, Martin, is basically consists of interviews with people that are doing just that right now, sort of building the future of AI, architects of AI. What's the best way for, let's say, the United States to prepare young people for this new era?
Right. I think that education is certainly very important, and to some extent teaching people about artificial intelligence is part of that. But at the same time, we have to recognize that obviously people have different talents and capabilities. Not everyone can be an AI expert or a data scientist or that type of thing. The impact that we're talking about is much more broad-based than that. And one thing that I think is certainly going to happen is that a lot of jobs, occupations, roles that are more routine, repetitive, predictable, they're going to be heavily impacted in the future. So one thing we want to do with our education system is prepare people to move out of things that are routine and predictable and do things that are not so predictable. And that, for example, would include areas like creativity, thinking of new ideas, building something new. And that means not just, an AI researcher, but maybe an artist, or an architect, those kinds of things where you're really creating something. Another area is interpersonal communication, where you're really building relationships with people. So someone that works with children, or someone who provides social services in a community, or someone that works in healthcare, a doctor or a nurse. These are areas where that interpersonal communication is very important. And then a third area that I think is likely to be very safe from artificial intelligence going forward are skilled trade type jobs, things like electricians, plumbers. These are jobs that really require lots of mobility and dexterity in unpredictable environments. In order to have a robot do what an electrician does, you would need a science fiction robot, something like C-3PO from Star Wars. That's very far in the future. So these jobs are relatively safe.
How far?
Oh, I would say at least 50 years, maybe more. That would be my guess. But
50 years, okay.
But and it could be much longer than that. That really implies almost human-level artificial intelligence. And one of the main takeaways from my book that I just did with all these interviews is that people really disagree. Even the smartest people in the world who know the most about artificial intelligence and are actually creating this technology, they disagree, vastly in terms of how fast all of this is going to happen. So the future is going to be disruptive, but it's also going to be very unpredictable.
And so I guess part of it is teaching people to adapt to disruptive change, right? I mean, I always think that, if you look at driving, what for example, and maybe this isn't a great example, but if you look at Uber, for example, and how that's changed how people travel around, and so all of these people have moved to basically driving under this algorithm, Uber's algorithm, and in 10 years, I guess maybe they won't even be driving. They'll have to find another job because that'll also be automated.
Right. I think that will happen eventually, maybe not in
10 years.
Maybe not in 10 years. I mean, Anton had mentioned earlier that there's a lot of hype, and it's true. Anytime you've got something that's changing rapidly and people are talking about it and there's a lot of attention on it, there's going to be a reality and there's also going to be a lot of hype. A couple months ago, Elon Musk said that within a year or so, he expects to have 1 million fully autonomous robotic taxis, Teslas, on the road. That's a good example of hype, okay? I really, really don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that there's going to be even one fully autonomous robotic taxi on the road a year from now, probably not even 5 years from now. So one thing we often say about this technology is that in the short run, we overestimate the pace of change, but in the long run, we underestimate it. So that's kind of the danger, is that we expect things to happen really fast, and then they don't happen quite that fast, and then we tend to dismiss these trends, and then it gets to be 10, 15, 20 years from now, and we're overwhelmed by the amount of change that we see in the long run. So it is, it's going to be unpredictable, but this technology is coming eventually.
Thank you very much. I'd like to open up the conversation to you in the audience, and please, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us who you'd like to answer your question, if you have a preference, please. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dana. I'm from Ernst & Young, Head of Business Development. I have a question, I think, to everyone. Recently, there are lots of videos in YouTube about 5G technology and how it affects our health. Because now we're talking about devices that will be interconnected, they will surround us at our homes, in the streets, and so on. And 5G technology is going to work much faster. And do you have any research? Because potentially, imagine how many devices will surround us and the level of, radiation, or, how it's going to affect people. Because now even our grandparents tell us, don't put your cell phone close to your head when you sleep, and it's only one cell phone. Thank you.
This is a fantastic question on so many different levels. Please, who would like to start?
Of course, we start with the political guy, right? To take the hit. This is the kind of debate I was talking about. We're only talking about, up to now, about the hype, the opportunities, the wow elements, and now suddenly somebody said, I don't want that antenna close to my house. I don't think this is fundamentally different from the debates we had in terms of telecoms in the past. The thing is, you don't necessarily need more antennas or more stuff. It's not like now on each street you're going to have a device giving you that. So I don't think we actually have a study on that. If there is, I'm very happy to be contradicted and also read it. I think that the dilemmas will be a bit different in the months to come and the years to come. We're talking about Internet of Things, and one of the ideas about 5G is how do we connect these things. Interestingly, when we started the Internet, it was the Internet of people. With campaigns, we started to talk more about Internet of bots. Speaking of a level in between, now we're talking about Internet of Things. I would say that the best, speaking of politics, sound bites and preparation, the success of Brexit was guaranteed, if you also see the movie, about that lovely soundbite, about taking back control. You don't have to get into that and populism if you retain control. What you said, AI does not create AI, is the best guarantee. It may not be in the sense that we will not be matched by our creation, you know, and then to be forced to do a Babel moment from this perspective. In terms of 5G, if there are health concerns, I think proactively, primarily telecoms should come forward and try to explain, but not in a panicking way, you know, and not in a defensive way, because each time people hear something, no, it's not true, then it sounds like a denial. I would come and simply explain how the system works.
Yeah, please. Anyone else like to chime in on that? I have to say there was a New York Times article in the last week and a half, I don't know how many people here saw it, that suggested that Russia was behind a disinformation campaign in the United States concerning 5G. I was a bit surprised myself, and the premise of the article was that because Russia doesn't have a leading position in 5G, Russia was using AI, amongst other things, to misinform people about non-existent adverse health effects when it comes to using 5G. So that was what I thought of when you first asked your question, was this New York Times article, which I thought was pretty interesting. Did you want to? Yeah.
I want to comment here on the 5G technology as well, because from my perspective, this is one of the directly answering to the question. I believe that all of the health implications of the 5G technology, of course, will be analyzed, and I am sure that we will not be impacted by this. But the real problems, the real issues that the industry right now faced with this, implementing the 5G itself, that first topic is that the telecom industry already invest a lot into the previous generation into 4G technology, and still they are not returning money out of this. Yes, and speaking about the new wave of investment into the new generation, many of the telecom operators are still concerned if they need to start implementing this. And this is I believe, one of the major problems, because at the end of the day, there are no doubts that specifically this technology is one of the major elements of the fourth industrial revolution, and one of the major leverages for the future AI revolution. But still, again, my point is that companies, sometimes they don't see value in this. This is quite interesting example from the Kazakhstan market. Do you know how much one of the major telecom operator in Kazakhstan get out of these modern big data AI technologies right now? Your guess? 0.1% of revenue, almost none. Yeah. And this is exactly what I'm speaking about. So when companies who's working on the ground, when they will see the value for them for implementing that type of the technologies, they will do this immediately. Then this will disrupt the market. But so far, there are still doubts on the business side.
Thank you very much. I want to take more questions from the audience. Before we go to the next question, please hold your question, and you're right after this. Muthoni, one of the things we haven't talked about is, and we need to explore more in this conversation, is how AI is going to change the workforce, what it means. You know, Martin has been pointing out that there's an upside and there's a downside. As the singular female representative of our panel, I want to inform everyone what I neglected to include in the beginning, which is that you're co-organizing the Nairobi Women in Machine Learning community, which I find fascinating. How many women are in that society, in that association?
There's about 2,000 members, and an interesting reason why we exist would be currently only 0.5% of the global population knows how to code. So we are entrusting algorithms, creation of algorithms, to a very minute percentage of the population, yet we expect these algorithms to affect our lives for the next 10,000 years. So I think it's important, and what the community is doing is to try and create opportunities for people to access education, quality education, how to deal with data, how to deal with compute, and those kinds of things. Yeah.
Should I be surprised that there are more than 2,000 women in an association of machine learning in Nairobi? Is this just prejudice making its way into the way I see the world?
I think we have the media to thank for the AI hype, but generally across the globe we've seen an increase in interest in AI or people working in AI. Yeah.
And how does AI change things for women in the workforce? Is there more of a chance?
I think there's a lot of opportunity to change the workforce, and I'd give you a practical example of what we've done in Nairobi. We've created a curriculum, a 4-month curriculum to teach people very basic data science skills. And what we've seen from the program, is the women now have access to jobs that are more flexible. That means they can, if they have families, if they have young kids, they can stay at home and continue to work. And this is a very interesting advancement in how work happens, especially in a context where it probably takes you 3 hours to get to the office because of traffic, but now you have people either working on their mobile phones or at home and trying to figure out how to solve problems. So I think we are in very interesting times.
Thank you. Please, your question.
We know that developing artificial intelligence actually is giving us to a lot of opportunities, but what about the potential risk? For example, Elon Musk always talking about that in terms of private life, information security, and we know that in future might be artificial intelligence might be used as a type of arms and other things. And what our speakers think about the risk of developing artificial intelligence.
Sure. Well, Martin talked about the danger of an arms race, about income inequality, and some of the joblessness. But this is definitely something that we need to talk more about. So please, maybe if you want to start, and then...
Let me start with the immediate, I believe, risks that potentially each of us can see in the very near future, which is tightly connected with this AI technology development, is the risk of 100% deprivatization of our personal data. Because right now there are two approaches discussed in different countries. Because I said in the beginning that you need data in order to feed AI. Without this, it doesn't work. And you need personal data to feed AI. And there are two approaches right now that different organizations are trying to analyze. The one approach is complete deprivatization of your personal data. So everybody will know everything about everyone. Yeah. Which is, of course, I don't want to share some details of my personal life. And the second approach, which is still under the discussion, and I believe it's quite interesting, and we will see, I believe, in the very close future, in years from now, is that companies or organizations who use your data, who feed with this data their AI engines, they will pay you. They will pay you personally for your data. They will pay with the service, like, for example, Facebook do right now. What they do right now, they give you the very nice service, access to the social media, but they're heavily using your personal data. And this approach can be one of the immediate implications. And I believe that governments right now should start analyzing this properly in order to have at least opinion on this topic.
Sure, I'll just say that I think we've talked quite a bit about the near-term risks of artificial intelligence, things like weaponization, inequality, the impact on privacy and so forth. And these are very real concerns, things that we definitely need to start struggling with in order to come up with solutions. But then there's a whole second category of risk or concern, and this is what you've heard Elon Musk talk about, and also very prominent people like the late Stephen Hawking. And this is the concern that there could someday be a superintelligence, and it could present an existential threat. In other words, we could have machines that truly can think at the level of human beings and might actually, of their own volition, threaten us because they want to destroy us, or maybe because they're so smart that they do things in a way that we don't understand and that don't turn out to really be to our benefit. And this is what's called the control problem, or the risk of
losing control of the machines.
Right, exactly. And I mean, this is a science fiction concern. It's not a real concern right now. But most people that are really smart, you know, in fact, all the people that I talked to in my latest book, I mean, most of them acknowledge the possibility of this, and some are very, very concerned about this. So there are some very smart people actually working on this problem. But it is a futuristic problem. You know, it's something that definitely lies in the future, and I think that when people like Elon Musk go too far in hyping this particular concern, it's doing a disservice, because it really distracts us from the much more immediate concerns. But it is a legitimate issue.
More immediately, just briefly, if I could ask you to answer this, what about jobs? I mean, I know you look a lot at joblessness. How could employment change, let's say in the next 20 years?
Right, I think that within the next 20 years, for sure, you're going to see a huge number of jobs that are fundamentally routine, repetitive, and predictable are going to disappear.
And what happens to the people that were doing them?
Right, and that's the question. I mean, definitely there will be new jobs created as well. And some people will argue that, you know, that's the solution, right? There are going to be new things created, and people that lose the old jobs will move into the new jobs. I would argue that there's some evidence to suggest there aren't going to be enough of those new jobs, and also the new jobs that are created, you know, they may not be a good match for the people that need to work. You know, they may all be artificial intelligence experts, or robotics engineers, or data scientists. And if you're someone that is driving a taxi, it's going to be really hard for you to transition into that area. So I think that ultimately we're going to need radical solutions, and I've talked a lot about a universal basic income someday as one way to address this problem.
Thank you. Radu, please.
Really short reply to the question. It's also about public awareness and a sense of immediacy. Sometimes some things are there for years, and then you have legislation even in legislative circles who are slower than the average. I'll give you an example, but then they become global standard. I'll give you an example for Europe, GDPR. Around the world, people are inspiring themselves from the Brussels-based legislation dealt to protect data. For the rest, normally we only learn out of public outcries when we see something that we don't like. In the 90s, we were shocked about the Dolly ship case. Last year in November, I remember, because I was traveling across Asia, we were shocked about a Hong Kong scientist who was playing with DNA. And then what did the stakeholder do? Immediately they took measures. Why? Because of the public outcry. Now there's always a fundamental dilemma. What do you do? Quick action via regulation, legislation, or do you do smart legislation, which is wise, which needs consultation? I think this is going to be a fundamental dilemma. And let me finish with one thing. I agree with you about the shift in jobs. You know, it's not so easy to tell, for example, a lady in northeast Romania who has been doing textiles lawn, that now she can be an NI software engineer. Perhaps an engineer in Bucharest could be skilled, or in Cluj, you know, could be skilled to become a software AI person. But what do you do with people who are doing really basic stuff? I think these are fundamental questions.
Thank you. We have a question over here, please.
Здравствуйте. Я хотела бы узнать, вот следуя теме форума, в общем мировой такой массе, какой процент глобализации мы сейчас достигаем? Ну, это вопрос, мне кажется, каждому. То есть какой процент именно сейчас глобализация искусственного интеллекта мы сейчас достигли? И в ближайшее время какой этот скачок будет в процентном соотношении?
Если можно уточнить вопрос, какой процент глобализации Спасибо. Thank you.
Let me answer to this question from a different angle, I would say, because I have some numbers, quite interesting numbers actually. In the very beginning of this session, I said that we most probably will see the next winter of AI technology on the market, and I've seen a couple of interesting researches recently that have been done in Europe, but I believe they reflect the overall global situation. So there was an analysis that out of thousands, it's important, of companies or startups who's announcing themselves that they're using AI technology, 40%, almost half, have no touch at all of the AI technology. So again, this is the clear demonstration that this is very hypey technology right now. And there is another very interesting number. So from 6 to 10% maximum out of these companies are really using AI technology right now. And I believe these numbers
6%.
can be, yes, these numbers can be extrapolated to the global industry and to the overall high-tech industry at least. Yes, and another, I believe, important element here is, again, I'm coming back to the topic of availability of the data, because AI right now is used first of all in the digital industry, where you do not have the physical touches of the physical environments, and there you have data. This is first, and the second, what are the most, I would say, used digital services in Kazakhstan? Facebook, ВКонтакте, Одноклассники, all of that non-local digital environments. Who owns the data of these environments? Companies who are not located here, who are using them outside of the countries. And out of this, you can imagine where the centers of AI excellence right now are concentrated. Of course, this is US, Europe. These are most of the centers, I mean, majority of centers of excellence are there. These 6% of companies mostly are there.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your patience, sir.
Yes, my name is Jargal. I'm from Mongolia. 2 questions about AI. Recently, China had generated news by robot journalism. A robot was generating and speaking just with a human face. Is it possible? How long it's going to be happen all around? First question. Second, AI privacy, data of privacy. In Estonia, I asked the programmer who had already done that. In Estonia, government can check any of your data. But you can check in your own turn who had been checking your data. Is it the way when so many data is coming, set somewhere, is it the way, reverse way of checking whether who had checked your data?
Well, the first question is, how quickly do I lose my job?
Yes, definitely there's going to be a big impact in journalism. The robot that the Chinese news station had, my understanding is that was a bit of a gimmick. It was more like a puppet. I don't think that was really a good example of this, but there are smart machine learning algorithms that look at data and write news stories, right? And that's a real application. That's happening in some of the largest media organizations, and that's going to get much better. So definitely there is that impact. In terms of the two-way scenario where you can look at who's reading your data and so forth, I mean, this is a question for regulation in terms of our privacy, whether the things that we look at is going to be accessible to other people and so forth, and that's a question that I think governments are going to have to struggle with.
We can't talk about AI without talking about, we're going to come to a question over here, fake news, because one thing that definitely AI has enabled or facilitated a little bit is the dissemination of fake news. Do you see that as a continuing trend?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a huge problem, and that happens because of bots on social media that can help to distribute fake news. There's even the innovations that might help generate fake news. OpenAI, which is an organization in Silicon Valley that's doing AI research, recently announced this very, very powerful AI system that can generate stories. You just give it one sentence to start off a story, and then will automatically generate a whole narrative to you that's very coherent, and it's completely made up and completely fake. So you can imagine a future where machines literally generate just junk information that is meaningless, and this kind of overwhelms our whole system. So these are all real risks, and again, this is probably an area where we're going to need regulation.
We were just talking in the preparation of the panel about the situation about AI anchors and so on. It's a very interesting case. I think we can rest assured that one of the basic elements of being human is the element of personality and the element of debate. Okay, you can have, let's say, a mock technological anchor, a mock whatever, from a technological point of view. But can you do a debate? No. From this perspective, can you write an op-ed? Can you, speaking of the previous debate on the future of journalism as well, can you have a series of AI machines doing charming op-eds, trying to convince you of being, let's say in the US, of becoming more Republican or more Democrat? This is the essence of being human, this debate element and so on. And as long as we have the proper safeguards in place, speaking of AI does not do AI, and the essence that the machine is neutral, that anchor is basically works on a script. And on the other side, on the data that you mentioned, here it's a wide regional difference. And I think there will be a certain backlash, even in countries who control stronger the internet. For example, I would be cautious if I would be China about this social credit system. And if it's something which they mean well, they should really properly explain it. Why? Because one of the essence of humanity is also the idea of second chance. Because let's say if you're on a social credit system and you make a first mistake and then you're partially blacklisted, what if you want to become better at a certain, how do you do redemption, speaking of social credits and so on, or do we simply prevent people from moving to one place to another?
Sorry.
I like
we have another question, if you just briefly, but please, yes.
Yeah, I like the idea of debating actually, because as probably some of you knows that AI already passed Turing test. You don't know if it's machine or the blind test and machine answering to the question, and you don't know if it's machine or not machine. And I believe that AI can pretend that they are debating. They are not debating, but can pretend that they're debating.
Sometimes reporters pretend that they're reporting. Please.
Амрикулов, фрилансер, интерлокер, Казахстан. Вопрос такой, мне кажется, вот эта дискуссия идет в технократическом каком-то русле, то есть искусственный интеллект – это проблема далекого будущего, коммунистического, когда единое человечество будет управляться единым интеллектом, правильно? Потому что вся природа, Вселенная устроена разумным образом, так? Мне кажется, сейчас на повестке дня стоит вопрос блокчейн, войне против биткоина. То есть блокчейн-технологии, блокчейн 3.0, он уничтожает государство, уничтожает банки-ростовщики, которые правили последние 5000 лет. То есть это глобальная революция, понимаете? Вот мы о чем, мне кажется, должны обсуждать, если приземляться на конкретную почву. Вот. Будет ли побежден биткоин? Победит ли вот эти демократические силы, которые породили интернет, значит, блокчейн, криптовалюта и так далее, так далее. То есть те технологии, те силы, которые работают на все человечество, а не на узкую кучку, которая правила, олигархическую узкую кучку, которая правила последние 5000 лет и держала в темноте и в рабстве. Мне вот так кажется. Как вы относитесь к этой постановке?
Кто победит? Победит блокчейн или победит старая система? Yeah, that's a big question.
Just some starting comments on this. I'll give you two examples. I would first tell you that the essence of any currency is the idea of trust. So I think that irrespective of banking attacks, blockchain and different kind of, let's say, currency that the internet offers needs to win this trust game. Second, I think that on the medium and long term, looking at what a smart country does, namely Switzerland, I think that the fight will be about diversification. I'll give you an example. If you're thinking banks, you're thinking, I think this was one of the questions on one of the previous panels, you're normally thinking Swiss banks. Interestingly, the Swiss are starting to diversify. So on the one hand, you have there a hub for banks, and on the other side, in the small city of Zug, they're doing what you may call a kind of a Silicon Valley for cryptocurrency. So the very idea that these people are diversifying, I would say says something about their preparation for the future.
I guess the question, if I might put it in a slightly different way, is will AI, as part of this sort of broader technological advances we have, like with the blockchain and with cryptocurrencies, will that lead to a complete change in democratizing change in the world, where sort of defeating governments as we know them? That I think is your question, yeah? What do you think?
I don't think that's especially likely. I think that the way things are going now, artificial intelligence is going to be a tool for
autocracy,
the entrenched power centers, right? Whether that's corporations or the wealthiest individuals or countries, and certainly China is the case in point, where they're showing exactly how powerful this technology is, in terms of what they're doing with things like the social credit system and so forth to basically maintain power, right? So it would take something very disruptive to change that. Again, my hope is that we will develop policies like a basic income and so forth to help democratize this and make sure that everyone prospers. But I think it's going to take active policies to make that happen. Probably the default is that things become even more unequal and the current elite becomes even more entrenched if we don't take action.
I think we only have time for one final question, which I'll ask. Some news you can use for everyone here. So as we enter into the age of AI, what can we each personally, on a very personal level, do to prepare for it? To, I don't know, AI-proof ourselves against the risks, but also to prepare to take advantage. Maybe if we each go 20 seconds, what should I do tomorrow to get ready for the age of AI?
Well, start preparing for a future when there aren't going to be a lot of jobs doing routine, repetitive things. So make sure you're developing other skills, creativity, interpersonal skills, and so forth. And make sure that your children are doing the same thing, because that's really what the future looks like.
Very, very short answer from my side. And I believe the immediate step number one today or tomorrow that you can do and you have to do from my perspective is to clarify for yourself that what is the nature of the technology, what is the nature of the AI technology, and what are the key limitations that you will not be fooled by all of these hypey messages around us. And I believe this will give you the clarity where to land in the near future.
Muthoni?
I think for me, and focusing more on young people would be education and trying to teach people how to, not just to program, but focusing on fundamentals of science and math, because ideally they drive innovation, so that would be important. Yeah.
Radu?
Say, to borrow a famous quote, keep calm and carry on. Keep living, keep loving, keep doing your stuff at the same time, like we are, when we follow our interests, our desire, our aspirations, we want to become better. Let's try to be better, because it's going to be a competition also in the future, irrespective of AI. Let us win that competition.
Vice Minister, you're at the end, but you can't hide.
I'll join the colleague that you need to wait and you need to trust, because looking Just a few years back, we all used to think smartphones are evil. There were a lot more people who were saying that it kills your vision, it kills our children, but we see from year on year there are less and less people of this opinion. I think introduction of technologies such as 5G or use of blockchain or AI, all of that will be improving quality of life. The more we demand, the more technologies making it better. Well, 5G, summing up, I would like to say that I'm surprised that this question was posed regarding health. Because really, just a week ago at the Astana Economic Forum, we were discussing pilot project and we're launching in Kazakhstan 5G in 5 cities. Most of the people, especially girls, ask the question, how much faster will my phone will serve me in this 5G network? I think technologies create new technologies, and I think we only have to wait and enjoy our lives.
Thank you very much. We're out of time. I'm sure one thing that a robot journalist can do better than a human one, or at least this journalist, is keep track of time. So I know we're out of that now because of the people in the audience. So allow me to thank the Eurasian Media Forum for bringing us all together, you for sitting through this day. I know a lot of really robust conversations, and most of all right now, our panelists for participating in this conversation. Please join me in thanking them.